Image rendering. So you might be asking, what is image rendering? Well, image rendering is the creation of a photorealistic image from a CAD model. So inside of SolidWorks, when you start modeling parts, they end up in this kind of gray default appearance, right? The skin of the model, the boss extrude, the cut extrude, kind of has this gray color to it, if you will. And depending on the material, sometimes you'll grab appearances from that, as far as you make it cast iron or steel and so forth there. But you can also go to the next level and say, hey, I'm creating a model of a product, and I want this product to appear as if it is going to be on the shelf, right? As far as the right color scheme, maybe it's got decals or stickers on it, all that type of stuff you can actually build into your model itself, and then you can go through this process called rendering, where you create an image or a video of it, and basically the rendering part of it actually takes into consideration of lighting and how the light sources are bouncing off of the appearances on the faces of your model, and actually give you as close to realistic look of the model as possible there. And so you might ask, okay, where would I want to use this in? Well, say you're developing a new product and you have a marketing department that's wanting to get the buzz out, right? Wanting to let the market know that, hey, in Q3 of this year, we're going to be launching this product. And so you could actually render some images of your model at this point and say, hey, this is what the marketing department needs to show on the website or on these emails they're sending to get the buzz out and the excitement out about your product itself there. And so as a few examples, I've got some still images here. You can see the dumbbell, the buzz bait in the top right, and this screwdriver in the bottom left. Now these specifically weren't made in SolidWorks. They were made in an application known as Pro Engineer, which really no longer exists. Now I think it is replaced by Creo, by the company that makes it. But the same type of things can be done inside of SolidWorks. And you can see here there's all this dark backgrounds there. There's lights that are hitting the model in a certain direction there. And there's different appearances on the different faces of the model. For instance, on the screwdriver you can see this kind of translucent handle that you can see the actual metallic part of the screwdriver through itself there. And this can also be kind of leveled up to videos itself here. So I'll show this video of my buzzbait here. And hopefully you can see this okay on the recording itself here, but you can look closely. It even shows the reflections of the blade in the head of the buzzbait there, right around this part of the animation. You can actually see the reflection of that blade spinning on the head itself there. And all that stuff happens in this rendering phase, where basically the rendering engine is basically mapping where those light sources are going to, or those light rays I should say, are going to leave a source. It's going to bounce off a given surface and then be hitting a second surface here in this case. And that can be somewhat computationally expensive in order to do that type of ray tracing work. Alright, so hopefully that set the stage for what we're going to be seeing in terms of rendering. And now let's get to more of the SolidWorks side of things. And we're going to work with this little screwdriver as an example. And so I've got a fresh version of the screwdriver, if you will, one that hasn't had the appearances and everything applied to it. So, oops, accidentally clicked the wrong file there. Yes, I know, SolidWorks can't open a zip. So let's go back here, into here, and let's get this blank one at this point. Let this load up in SolidWorks for one moment. Alright, so I've got this SolidWorks part, this flat-headed screwdriver, and right now I don't have any appearances applied to the screwdriver at all. It's kind of that flat gray appearance, if you will. And I've done some special things like separate this face out using split lines and so forth there, but other than that it's more or less the same as you'd expect. And the idea is, hey, I want to make this look a little better. Something along this line is what we'll try to be approaching in this case. And so one of the first things you need to be thinking about in SolidWorks is, do I have the appropriate add-ins loaded into my session of SolidWorks? And in this case, in order to actually apply the rendering part of it, you're going to need to have this PhotoView 360 add-in installed or active in the given session. So in this case, I'll just click right here, right next to the gear, but not on the gear, and go down to add-ins. Let me pull this up. It came up on a different screen. And what I'm looking for is this guy right here, PhotoView 360. Right now it's not loaded on startup and it's not an active add-in, so I'm just going to click on the left-hand side and make it an active add-in in this given session. If you're going to be doing a lot of of rendering, you might click this box on the right hand side, which will load it every time you start SolidWorks. But in this case, I don't do that much of it, so I'm just going to click on the left hand side. And I'll wait 1 moment, and it loaded it into the session of SolidWorks. And one of the things, if you noted, before I didn't have this Render Tools tab, and now it exposed that Render Tools tab. And you can always come down here and right click in Tabs and be able to expose it here as well. And the reason I make the point out of this is because a lot of the work that we're going to be doing with applying faces, or excuse me, applying appearances to faces and modifying the scene will be done through this Render tab. So I'd suggest you go ahead and have it open. And specifically, we'll be looking at this Edit Appearance button in the Edit Scene, and then there's Preview window and there's Final Render. I don't use the Preview window a whole lot, but Final Render is where you're actually going to say, hey, do that rendering process that we've been talking about, generate the JPEG, so that I can then send that off to, say, the marketing department, for instance. Alright, so the next thing we got to do is start working at applying appearances to the model. So in this case, we'll try to make it look something similar to this right here. We've got some grays, some metallics, appearances on the metallic part, got a black tip, and so on and so forth there. So I'm going to go right up into Edit Appearance. And right now you have different selection options for when you're applying an appearance. You can say, hey, I want to apply it to the entire part. I want to apply it to a face. I want to apply it to a surface, a body, or a feature. And so depending on what level of granularity you're looking at applying it to, you pick the appropriate option. So in this case, I'm going to be very granular in nature, and I'm going to say I just want to apply it to the face itself. And so one thing I could do is click a color down here, or if I knew the RGB value of a color, I could click here. But I'm going to come over here on the right hand side and pull up the appearances kind of pane over here, drive down into appearances, and now they've got families of appearances. Like I want to say, hey, this handle is going to be a plastic, so I'll say it's a medium gloss plastic, and it's going to be a blue medium gloss plastic for this part right here. So I can just click it. And when I say blue medium gloss, it's actually having to do with the shininess, if you will, of the appearance itself. And so you won't really see a whole lot of effects in the graphics window like what I'm seeing now, but once I go to rendering, you will see it at that point. And notice what I've done here is I just went through, so I've got faces selected, I just clicked on the individual faces that I wanted to apply that blue coloring to. So now I'll go ahead and accept that. And so now you can see a little bit of that kind of luster showing up. And so that looks good. Now I'll just continue on. Let's apply that kind of gray plastic appearance to the other parts of the screwdriver. So I'm just going to right click and clear. I will have selected faces again. I'm going to come over here to the right hand side. Let's go to medium gloss here. Let's say it's a light gray here. And so again, I'm just going to go through and select the individual faces that I'm interested in. So there's those faces. Then I'll come on this side of the model, kind of rotate around here, and just work my way through the model itself. Alright, there we go. So, got all this face selected. I'm applying the light gray medium gloss plastic appearance to it. And I'll accept it at this point. And now let's work on this metallic shaft here. So again, Edit Appearance. I'm going to still use the faces. And this is not going to be plastic, it's going to be a metal. Let's say it's a steel, and let's say it's a polished steel. And so then I'll just select here. You can see that kind of shiny representation already showing up. And I'm going to click all these faces except for the tip. Alright, I think that looks good. There we go. And then last but not least, let's make that tip black. So again, going Edit Appearance, clicking, I want to control it at the face level. Let's say this is a painted. Sure, it can be black spray paint for all of these purposes. And so I'll come in here, accidentally clicked out of the face, so that's why it wasn't showing up. And clicked all those faces. There we go. Alright, so now I've went ahead and applied these appearances. I'm going to go ahead and save this model just in case something bad was to happen. And I'll save it as lecture. We'll convert the older version to the file. That's fine. Alright, so now we're at a good spot. Alright, so I went ahead and I applied all of those appearances. Now what I can do is actually do a rendering. And so before we go ahead and click this final render, I'm going to go into options. And one of the reasons I want to go into options here is to look at the render quality. I'm going to use the regular size. You can see it's creating it as a JPEG. And instead of preview, render, nope, I'll leave it at good. And I'll leave the final render at good as well. Now, I don't do a lot of rendering, and I'm working off my laptop here, so I don't really know how long it's going to take, but I want to keep it short for the video's purposes. But if I was doing this in reality, I would basically leave it as good and good until I was satisfied with what I was seeing on the final rendered image, and then I might go through and say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and put the final render at best or maximum, for instance, there, and then hit it go. It'll take a little bit longer to compute, but then I'll be getting a better result at the end. So what the idea here is I get this, I make it look the way I want, I'll hit the final render button. In this case, I'm not going to worry about the camera perspective. Well, that's another part of rendering that we could go a long ways down the rabbit hole, so to speak, as far as these options with how to place lights in there and what type of lights, and then also where I put the camera or if I'm using perspective or not, or all other things we could talk about in this rendering category. But I clicked final render. And let's see if I can drag this over here. There we go. Now this is the preview screen that shows up here. And SolidWorks is still working at this point. And then here is the rendering screen itself there. And you can see as SolidWorks goes through and working on the individual pixels of the image itself. And so it looks like it's going relatively quickly, a few more moments. And the render is complete. So I've got this image, and I could actually right here, save the image. And I'll just call it image 1. And at this point, I've got the image saved. So now I can use this elsewhere. So I'll just click it here, and here's kind of the Windows File Explorer of what we just rendered at this point. Obviously, if I'm using this in a presentation, that's a very much improved image that we'd be showing our viewers as opposed to that default CAD model appearance that we had originally. Alright, so I'll go ahead and close out of all this. We can talk about a few more things as we walk through the slides here. All this we've covered. We could also check the contours only button. If you wanted to just show like kind of the outlines of it there, you can kind of get this cartoonish feel going at that point. And also we can edit the scene. Notice I've got this kind of reflective background of a scene there, but it doesn't have to be. I can come in here and say things like, well, I don't want to use any of these basic scenes, but maybe I want a studio scene or a presentation background. An example, let's see, maybe something like this. And basically the idea here is I move the part file around to get it to sit in a certain way. I'm not really liking that one, so let's go back out. There we go. It would have a monster screwdriver in this case, right? That wouldn't make sense. In this case, a factory floor type of background here. Also, as I'm really playing around here at this point, you can also add these pictures to it to yourself, right? When these environments here, it is possible to go ahead and have your own custom environment based off of an image. One of the things I've seen in the past for like senior design type or capstone projects is students taking a picture of the shop which they're going to build their device in the spring semester, but they're sitting in the fall semester and using that as the backdrop. So it's as if they're showing, hey, this is what the model is going to look like, or this is what the prototype is going to look like when May rolls around and they're making presentations. And at that point, it's only like, say, November or December of the academic year. So this looks relatively reasonable, right? I'm taking a picture of a screwdriver laying on the ground, and I'm in a outdoor scene in this case. And just like last time, we could go through and we can hit final render to see this as well. So let's just go ahead and do that just so we can see what it looks like. Again, there's the preview window popping up, and then shortly will come the final render window. And really we're looking just to see how this looks like in this scene. So in this case, one of the things you're seeing is that it's relatively dark in this scene, right? You can see the screwdriver there, but it's not the best rendering in the world there. And so this is one of those cases where you'd probably edit the scene and add some lighting to it. And again, that's outside of the scope of what I want to talk about there, but it is possible inside of these rendering environment of SolidWorks. And so I'm just going to go ahead and edit, put this back to one of these basic scenes for now. Something like that. Alright, so we've talked about the scenes, we've talked about appearances. One thing I also want to talk about this idea of adding a decal. So maybe your product's going to have a sticker on it, right? That's going to say the product name or something like that. Well, you can actually create that decal type appearance inside of your rendering engine inside of SolidWorks. And so this typically starts off with an image file. So in this case, we'll just use a simple PNG file here. And one of the special things about it is that it does have a transparent background. And so we'll say, hey, we're going to have this sticker that's going to be transparent, and it'll sit on the handle of our screwdriver. So to do that, that takes a little bit more work. You can come down here on the pane on the left hand side, you have like where it holds all the features, where it holds the configurations, then it holds all the appearances here. And inside of the appearances, you can say decals, and you can right here and click in this area and add your own decal. They do have some default ones. You can see like a barcode or the recycling symbol or like a UL symbol there. But in this case, I have my own, and I want to left click on it, dive down here, and get to the decal itself. So I've got this decal, and you can't really tell anything besides it showing up in the preview. But if I click in the model space, you can see that I clicked on that face that I'm going to apply it on, and now I've got this kind of rectangular box showing up here. And that rectangular box is showing kind of the outer bounds of this image. But we did say the image is supposed to be transparent for the most part, right? Well, that's because I'm not using the decal image alpha channel. So when I say to use that, basically SolidWorks is interpreting that background as transparent. It's looking at the opacity values there and adjusting it accordingly. So now I can see that PSU MECET 121. Let's kind of put this in the isometric view, make sure it's right side. And so I can move this around to get the angular position just right. I can also grab this to scale it. And so now I'm seeing that PSU MECET 121 exactly the way I want it. So I'll go ahead and hit accept at that point. And then finally I could do an additional rendering. Let's go ahead and do that one more time just to show that PSU MECET 121 sticker. So let's say that's the way I want it to look. I'll again hit final render. And again, we wait a few moments while that rendering engine kicks up. There's the preview window, and then coming shortly should be the final render. And one thing you'll notice almost immediately about this one as opposed to the last renderer is that this renderer is showing a lot lighter of a scene, right? And all that lighting is just built into the scene definition. And so that's looking pretty good. So maybe we save this one out as well. And we'll just call this image 2. And let's see what we've got. There we go. So that looks pretty good there. And so hopefully that's all making sense. Hopefully this is kind of inspiring you to make better quality images for the presentations you can make, right? For instance, on this if I was making a PowerPoint, let me just go ahead and boot up PowerPoint real quick just to show an example. I might have a PowerPoint slide that says my project, for instance, and maybe I insert that image right here. One of the things I'm a big fan of here is having a white background, right? So now you can see as I would be creating this PowerPoint presentation that screwdriver just kind of blends in nicely with the background, right? It looks very professional here, and then I could talk about maybe the design itself and how it's going to be manufactured and so forth. But the key takeaway thing for this video is notice that image is a lot better than like a screenshot that you could possibly be getting from just the default SolidWorks environment there. So this whole idea of image rendering hopefully is inspiring you to kind of level up your presentation skills there. And probably the easiest way to do that is by creating rendered images of your CAD models that you can then drop into presentations just like this.